We're ready to proceed.
Good afternoon. Today is Monday, August 5th, 2019. This is an emergency meeting of the El Paso County Commissioners Court. Item number 2, pursuant to Texas Local Government Code Section 551.045, this is an emergency, unforeseen situation requiring immediate action by the El Paso County Commissioners Court, in that on Saturday, August 3rd, 2019, a mass casualty incident occurred in El Paso County. The City of El Paso has issued a local disaster declaration following the incident for the purpose of mobilizing financial assistance and activation of the city's emergency management plan. The purpose of the agenda item is to receive direction from the Commissioners Court on pursuing financial resources in the immediate aftermath. Item number 3, discuss immediate action regarding El Paso County's response to the mass casualty incident occurring in El Paso County, Texas on Saturday, August 3rd, 2019, including acceptance of donations pursuant to Texas Local Government Code Section 81.032 and the availability of state, federal, and/or grant funding for costs associated with El Paso County's response.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Judge and Commissioners. Joanne Bernal, El Paso County Attorney. I want to just begin by saying that since the shooting on over the weekend, your county administration did a really fabulous job stepping up, and in response to the city's declaration, Ms. Keller exercised her authority under that declaration and assisted the community, particularly, the medical examiner's office, the IT office, Ms. Keller herself and her staff. And in doing so, what has occurred is that the county, as other governmental entities have begun to expend a whole lot of money on behalf of the victims, and that's a good thing, and that's the right thing to do. We became aware this weekend that there are various various funds available for reimbursement to local entities, essentially to the local taxpayer, for costs arising from this horrific incident. I received a call from Mr. Eric Pearson, who's here today. He is the CEO and president of the Community Foundation, and we've asked him to come to give you all a little bit of information. Obviously, none of us have ever been through what we're going through, and so we're learning as we go about the best way to support the victims in this community. I had a conversation today with the county attorney from Wilson County, who was the county attorney during the Sutherland Springs shooting, and he's offered some good advice and counsel. But one thing that we need to do on a very urgent level is move forward as quickly as possible to access as much money and as many places for funding for our victims and for the community. And so that's why we've put this on today, to get some direction from the Commissioner's Court for Ms. Keller and her staff to proceed in seeking reimbursement for the costs associated. And with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Pearson to come up and give you some more information on the availability of funding for our community.
Before we start, Betsy, thank you for those. Those are very deserving comments. And Joanne, thank you and your team that nobody knows that they're behind the scene and worked all weekend, every one of your attorneys and your staff in what you had to do. So thank you so much for doing that. And please thank the rest of your staff on the behalf of the Commissioner's Court. Eric.
Judge in court, just appreciate the response that we got. Again, just to reiterate what you said, the administration at the county level was responsive and really wonderful, very open to, whatever we were able to do together. As you may know, it's been a busy weekend for a lot of people, especially our law enforcement and our first responders and our medical examiner's office. I had been in touch with the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, which is based in Tucson, and Clint Mabee, and they dealt with the Gabby Giffords shooting a couple of years ago. And he said the first thing you need to do is get with your county attorney and get with your county government to make sure that you all kind of cooperate, and that the worst thing that we can do is have a splintered response. And so the El Paso Community Foundation, sort of at the center of the nonprofit side of it, is trying to bring in other foundations. Paso Norte Health Foundation has a fund. We have different nonprofits that we're trying to convene and make sure that we move forward arm in arm. And we want to make sure that that extends to our local government entities, especially the County of El Paso, and try to help you all and make sure that it's appropriate to apply for funding, whether it goes to, and more appropriately, it goes to a governmental entity such as you or to a nonprofit. We want to make sure that we're moving from the same playbook. And so this is just the idea of setting up a memorandum of understanding between the two entities, the County of El Paso and the El Paso Community Foundation, a memorandum that we will cooperate on this, and that we can collectively, sort of reach out to those funding entities, whether they be for government or for the private sector, nonprofit sector, so that we can collaborate on getting those monies to the El Paso region and supporting our victims, our law enforcement, our county, our medical examiner's office, and the nonprofits that are providing that kind of trauma support for both victims and for witnesses and for our community at large. So there's a lot to be done. We know it's a long haul. We think this is the first step in a lot of steps to make sure that we are able to best serve our community, listen, and respond.
Mr. Pearson, obviously we desperately need this help, and will the city be participating as well?
That is our hope. We are attempting to get a proclamation from the city of El Paso in the same vein as this today, and get the same sort of MOU so that we're able to just work seamlessly among these entities. Additionally, there's a representative from Representative Veronica Escobar's office here. We will coordinate with the state and the federal level to make sure that we're identifying the funds that are available and making sure they're going to the appropriate entities for the appropriate response.
Once we agree on the MOU, there's some governance on our behalf as to where the money goes, or is that left up to the foundation?
So I think that's going to be the hardest part to figure out, and really it's going to be a constant conversation. A collaboration requires communication at every level, and so the foundation in what we've set up is really looking at a response to three sectors of our community in priority. Really, it's the folks that were shot and injured and killed, and their families. That's our first priority, is trying to make sure that they're cared for in ways that we don't know. And I'll give you the example from Tucson. Is there was a family they lost their daughter in the Gabby Giffords shooting, and they needed more than anything someone to open their mail, help them with their bills, an actual person to take the calls from ABC and NBC News and the New York Times and the Washington Post and all of the media inquiries, because they needed time to breathe and to grieve. And so that, as an example, is the kind of response that we don't know is going to happen. We just want to be as flexible as possible and we're going to be sort of unrestricted for this purpose on those funds. I think that the grants that we're going to apply for together, those will generally have some stipulations and restrictions as to their use, and we want to make sure that we're in full compliance. And so if it's going to the governmental entity, we're going to work together and make sure that we're using that money collectively for its intended purpose, and able to report back to those foundations or government agencies that are providing the funding, and conversely deal with it on the nonprofit side, make sure that we're using those restricted funds for those purposes. And I didn't finish my point. The second group would be the folks that were witnesses. The folks that didn't necessarily suffer physical trauma in the Walmart, but who were there and who essentially witnessed an act of war on the United States in front of them. And that terrorist act is going to have emotional and mental consequences, and so we want to be able to support that. And then the third group is the community at large. Collectively, we've always taken pride in the idea that we were the safest city in the country, and that we could rise above all of the fray of vitriol that has been sent our way from elsewhere. And I think we were humbly put in a position where we've lost our innocence on Saturday. And so we need to think about how we can creatively help this community as a whole heal. And I think a big part of it is gathering and being able to express ourselves, and so that's our third priority.
And first responders, is that within the witnesses? Where do you?
So
place that?
we think that that's part and parcel to everything we do. Definitely, I've been in touch with the assistant chief of the El Paso Police, and they've got an organization that is trying to help with first responders. We want to deal with all the folks that had to go and respond, and whether it's medical professionals or fire, EMS, transport services, or it's with the law enforcement themselves that had to go into that place. We want to make sure that we're trying to care for everyone. We're going to be on a limited budget no matter what we do, because you can never do enough. And we know that this is a long process. The foundation has raised in increments of $3 to $1,000, just online, not including corporate gifts, approximately $300,000. And we've more than doubled that from the corporate side. So we'll have a formidable amount of money to be able to activate, and we're trying to make sure that everybody is collaborating to come up with a cogent plan to make sure that we're doing right by the community and caring as much as we possibly can.
Well, we have a tremendous amount of respect for your foundation, so that is excellent. And plus the fact that you brought it to the table, and we appreciate that you're able to allow us to know, what are the grants that are available, what can we do. As you said, there's so much need, and, our budgets aren't fixed on these consequences sometimes. So thank you for that contact and coordinating everything that's been taking place.
Thank you. We're here to listen, so I appreciate it.
Commissioners? Commissioner Robinson?
Mr. Pearson, thank you for being here. My condolences go out to all the victims of this tragedy here in our great city of El Paso, great county of El Paso. It's really sad. But I'd like to think that from the standpoint that all the good work that you do and you've done in the community, Judge, I will submit that I think that we need to have one head rather than have multiple heads. As far as look, one is you mentioned several different situations as far as or groups that situations groups as far as utilizing the services, the funding. But I think the first and foremost should be the victims and the victim's family. I had to be here today, but I was supposed to be at a meeting today at 11 o'clock in regards to assisting the family with burial and other needs. So what I will do, I'll share the information with you, the group that I'm talking about, they're a nonprofit, as far as there's coordination with the funeral homes, Martin Funeral Home, Purchase, San Jose, and I think one other, as far as the burial. Now, but one of the issues that they're discussing had to do with the funeral home will take care of the service, the embalming, but what about the burial plots as far as the cemeteries? Because the funeral homes don't own the cemeteries. So some of them may not be buried here. So then the other issue, well, if they're not going to be buried here, where are they going to go to? Where the body will be shipped to? But basically what I'm trying to say, Judge and Commissioners, is that I applaud the foundation, and I've always known and seen that they do go and can be trusted. So I think maybe we should have them funnel everything to them and let them be the lead in regards to the direct distribution of the funding and make determination of who should receive and who should not.
I appreciate that, and that's our hope. We want to make it a collaborative effort among all the folks. I know you're talking about Hope Border Institute was helping with the funeral arrangements.
Yes, correct.
And we connected Purchase to them, for example. What we're going to need is really a trust situation with everybody and open communication and access. We're not looking to be the end-all be-all of the nonprofit sector. What we're looking to do is try to make sure that we have an effort that's coordinated around. We have 3 major government entities from the state, the county, and the city of El Paso who are going to have their hand in some of this. We want to make sure that there's a single point of contact for each of those entities, and that we're representing, at least as a spokesperson, and I have a staff member here, Sanjay Mathur, who will be heading up this project on behalf of the El Paso Community Foundation. And we're not here to take credit for anything. What we're here to do is try to make sure that everybody is moving arm in arm in the way that they can. Collaboration here is more important now than it ever has been.
Christina, can you guide us what's next, or Joanne?
Yeah, I think Joanne has some next steps that she'll give some
thank you.
direction to the court.
So, going forward, there's going to be many more instances where the county is called on to assist. And so our expectation is that under the plan, the emergency plan, that Ms. Keller is going to continue providing the assistance that's needed. I know that she's been keeping all of us informed on what she's been doing, and those needs will continue. In speaking to the county attorney in Wilson County, for example, in that county, the commissioner's court waived legal fees for the victims so that they could, like the probate fees, so that they could probate the wills of the deceased. And so there's other things that we're going to be coming back to you, asking for you to consider doing the county's part in assisting the victims. For today, what we're looking for is essentially some direction and a consensus from the court that Ms. Keller be authorized to continue to be the point of contact person with the Community Foundation, to go to find out more about the availability of funds. She is already on top of keeping track of the expenditures on behalf of the county, and so we'll be assisting her with that as well. But we will come back to you with an MOU before it's signed, and the terms of the MOU would come back to the court for your approval. And that will lay out and have a whole lot more information on reimbursable costs, on what the victims will receive, what the governmental entities might be eligible for. But for today, initially, we would like that direction on if you would like Betsy to proceed as your contact person in connection with the Community Foundation so that she can really proceed immediately in doing so.
I think we have that consensus from all the commissioners.
I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Or just to clarify, I guess, for the public and for the media, kind of what are the grants that we can apply for? What are the resources that we can apply for? So I know that I received information from you all regarding it's called an anti-terrorism emergency assistance program. I think that would probably be the number one step if we're applying for funding. But I just wanted to inform the public about what that entails, what kind of resources can be reimbursed, or what kind of funds can be reimbursed, or how that works.
So sadly, there's already a process in place for communities that suffer this kind of tragedy. And I say sadly because it's happened so often that there's grants set up and there's a process in place. I can tell you generally because we've spent really, Mr. Sullivan has spent the weekend researching the different grants. There are grants available to victims, directly to victims, and their reimbursable costs. There are grants available to communities for mental health treatment, whether you're a direct victim or you're someone who is suffering from mental health consequences because of the tragedy. There are law enforcement grants that are available. In some instances, there are monies available to help fund the prosecution of a perpetrator that would also be available. There's other kinds of law enforcement grants. So we have tried to at least get a handle on how many different types of funds are available. And so we think that we at least know for now, and we have been reaching out to other counties, so we make sure that we don't miss anything, but we at least feel like we know for now the different areas in which there might be monies drawn down to the community to assist with the effects of this. As far as the county goes, in addition to prosecution costs or hard costs, overtime, for example, sometimes it's more beneficial for the county to pay overtime costs than it would be to hire additional personnel. We have, Sheriff Wiles and his team, worked all weekend, and I'm sure that there's costs associated with law enforcement costs as well. So some of those are reimbursable, and there's also some direct benefits to first responders. I know that our constables were out this weekend assisting, and so we will need to keep track of those costs for overtime so that we can ensure that we at least have those available to try to seek reimbursement. But that's, I mean, kind of generally, that's what we know so far.
So for, it can go to hire additional staff or pay overtime costs or secure additional space to support the victim's needs. I think that's kind of for us, like for the public entities. But there's also, I think, money available for things like mental health and trauma-informed care, for medical expenses, including rehab, vocational rehab expenses, repatriation of remains, because we have also a number of Mexican nationals that lost their lives, and there are costs associated with sending their remains back to Mexico. Funeral expenses, child independent care, lost wages, crime scene cleanup, security at funerals, and other things. So I just wanted to thank you very much for the explanation and just to kind of let people know exactly what
So-
can be reimbursed.
Right. We will be working, of course, and I should, caution, what we've tried to access the amount of funds that were available to other communities, after the Pulse shooting and some of the other shootings. And I think that there's not enough money to be 100% reimbursable, so I don't want to give you the impression that, 100% of our costs will be reimbursed. But I think everything that we can do to help the victims be somewhat reimbursed as much as we can. One of the benefits of working with the foundation is that because of their good reputation and the work that Mr. Pearson and his staff does, I think that you will have a lot of private donations that would be available through the foundation that might not otherwise be available through governmental entities, which will really operate to the benefit of the victims as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. County Attorney.
Commissioner Pettis?
And County Attorney, we have the ability to use local funds, but we have to, our reserve funds or our fund balance, but I guess we have to issue an emergency declaration to access those funds. I don't know if that would be appropriate in this case or what steps would need to be taken, but I'm not saying for all types of expenditures, but if there's certain expenditures, let's say capital items in the medical examiner's office that need immediate attention or any other supplemental assistance that the medical examiner's office may need, is that an appropriate fund for us to tap into and us declaring an emergency to access those funds?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that, but we'll look at that. Frankly, I mean, that's another area that I hadn't really thought about that funding source. But
What I was going to say to that, Christina Sanchez, Assistant County Attorney, is probably that'll be part of the process in terms of also researching and looking at that, because if there are grant funds that are available, I don't know if there's any offsets to any costs in terms of the grant requirements for that, but that's something that maybe we can look at in conjunction with that process. So before we access those county funds, if there's already funds available, we can do so. Wally, did you want to go ahead?
So Judge Commissioners, Wally Hargrove from the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy. First, our first response would be looking at our contingency reserves that we have available for maintenance and operation, emergency needs, and capital. To that extent, once we exhaust our contingency funds and did not have other appropriations available, we could make a declaration of an emergency and designate a portion of the funds that we had set aside this year and budgeted for an emergency situation. I'm glad to announce that prior to this meeting, I received a phone call from Mr. Riley Webb, the director of CJD. They've also let us know that we have their full support and assistance in the identification of any funds, to include opening up discretionary grants that are not currently open, since they have that capability. So the state agency said they will commit their resources and also reach out to the other communities in Texas where we've had these instances occur and give us examples of what we need to track and what's available. Through the auditor's office, there will be an email going out later this afternoon to all of the entities within the county, so that we have a process within our time and attendance system to track your time and efforts on this unfortunate emergency as well, so that we can, and the governor's office was very pleased to hear that we were going to do that very swiftly.
Thank you, Wally. Yeah, I mean, we are learning by the hour of additional costs to anticipate. You know, the prosecution costs, you know, for example, other communities where they don't have prosecution costs, that can really add up for a criminal justice system, both the prosecution and the defense costs as well, and whether or not those are going to be something that falls on the County of El Paso. So we need to be aware of it, and we need to be looking for additional funds. Another thing that we are doing is reaching out to UMC, which is, you know, a separate governmental entity, to make sure that they are aware of the opportunities available for potentially, you know, reimbursement of any costs. UMC, Mr. Cintron and his staff were wonderful this weekend. And so we need to make sure that they have all the information available as well. So we'll be reaching out through our lawyers at UMC to make sure that's available. EHN should also be looking at these same matters, and we're going to get with Commissioner Stout to make sure that EHN has all these resources available to them as well.
Thank you. The governor's office did reach out to EHN this morning as
Okay,
well.
good. Any other questions?
Well, Betsy, your scope keeps getting wider, so you're ready for that, and I think it's a consensus that we provide that opportunity for Ms. Betsy Keller to take on that assignment.
Great. Thank you all very much. I know that all of you were out this weekend as well, and I would be remiss in not saying that you all make us real proud and the work that you did this weekend. Thank you.
Before you leave,
Ms. County Attorney, before you leave, Carl Robinson wanted to address.
I want to speak to my lawyer.
In private? Yes, sir.
There are short-term needs and there are long-term needs. I think it's very important that we prioritize all those needs, list all the needs and prioritize it. But I think first, let's keep our focus. Our first priority is the victims and their families.
Yes, sir.
So, Eric, I'll be willing and able to, the best I can, to assist you wherever I can with that, to direct all the things to you. I say, you say you talked to the Hope Foundation?
We have. I mean, you know, I think the biggest trouble we're going to have in the world of HIPAA and, you know, just respect for people's privacy is
Right.
We're going to look to you all, you know, and the city as well, for access to these families, to make sure that we're able to listen to them on a personal level and get what they need. We want to be respectful right now, but at some point we're going to be in their lives for the long term, and so that's my only request of you all from a departmental level at all levels of the county.
Commissioner Leon?
Mr. Pearson, before you sit down, I've got to agree with the rest of the court about Betsy being our point of contact. Over the weekend, she kept us informed. Where you have indecision, where you have lack of resolve, where you have hesitation, you will have failure. And so many things went wrong that you would have seen on the newspaper today that we should have fixed but didn't. But you did. You were there. You fixed it. And Mr. Pearson, you mentioned something about counseling for the people that witnessed this tragedy, and especially the young people that saw what happened, and you cannot unsee what you've seen. I remember things that happened in the 70s that I still have in my mind. You cannot delete them. So we're moving in a great direction, and I appreciate your involvement. And again, my my gratitude to the type of work that Betsy accomplished this week.
Well, we are in hands that are none more capable than hers, and we are very happy to be able to work with Betsy directly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, Judge?
Are you ready to close the meeting, Judge?
We're
That was
ready.
it? Yes?
Meeting
Okay.
adjourned.
Well, the donation item, is that anything? Okay.
No, it just, we received the court's consensus to move in giving Ms. Keller her direction.
So, meeting adjourned. Thank you so much.
This concludes today's meeting at 12:51 p.m.